G'day guys, my name is Wildcard and welcome back to my channel. Thank you for following my contents, I really do appreciate it. It's Tuesday, and you know what it is? It's News Day. Let's take a look at what's been happening in the world of rugby. So Six Nations is about less than a week away, and we've got a lot of injured players returning to all the teams, bolstering the competition. There has been a little bit of law change for the scrums. We should have a look at that in a minute. And then there's Super Rugby update, including New Zealand deciding to put all of their franchises in a bubble in Queenstown to avoid I guess, cancellations of the games. I think that's a bit risky, putting all your eggs in one basket. We should have a look at that later. But let's get on the way. Let's get started with the first piece of article we want to look at. This is quite interesting for me because I play front row. If some of you guys might not know, I am, you only see me from here and above, but I am 120 kilos. The camera makes me look a lot smaller, and I am absolute huge, okay? So in case you don't know, I am a prop, tight head prop, and when I played rugby, they still had the crouch, touch and hold, engage. There was no bind, right? So they changed the rules to prevent the engagement, made the scrum slower, made the scrum, I guess, more like technical. And as a result of them changing the crouch, the crouch, touch and hold, engage to crouch, bind and set, they have created issues for themselves. And they have decided for the Six Nations this year to patch one of the issues that they created as a result of making the scrum safer. Apparently, they didn't actually make the scrum safer. Is this new law that they're going to be adapting. So they're going to introduce a break for... By the way, I don't think this is going to do anything because we'll just see what it's about. So break for, basically, instead of having your foot parallel before the engagement, you're going to... the hooker is going to have one foot in front to kind of like being able to put himself back. Sometimes players already do this. So you can see this players here is already doing it. Is that Jamie? Yeah, Jamie George is doing it here already. So this is what's before the rules implemented. So sometimes they do that just to get themselves a bit more space for the opposition props, like give them a bit more engagement, like give more like a bit of more space for the engagement. So why did they introduce this? Why did they introduce breakfoot? It's actually to do with some a thing that the players do, and sometimes you probably will see this as well on TV. Something they call axle loading. What this is essentially, a lot of the props and hookers, you see this a lot, putting their head onto the opposition shoulder, and then they kind of like slip down into the engagement, right? You've seen this before. And what happened is when the hookers are doing this, is they put a lot of load apparently onto their spine, which is the truth, because you're not supposed to just like use your neck to hold up the weight of the scrum. And then that is a pretty dangerous thing to do, actually. So when they do, so the whole point of, so this is actually outlawed. You're not allowed to do that, but players still do just because of how the scrum works. Because, you have taken away the space because the player's not allowed to engage, yet you want them to bind together so they're like, 6 inches away from each other, or like not even see, like an inch away from each other's head. What do you expect them to do? Not put their head on the shoulders? Like that's just what you've done by changing the law. Now they wanted to fix that with the foot in front. Now, so now essentially they're trying to fix the problem they created themselves by changing the law. And so I don't think that's going to change anything. Just putting your foot in, it's not going to change anything because, as you can see, players already do this to create a bit of a space for engagement. You're just not going to do anything. It's just people are just going to end up doing the same thing. It doesn't really matter. But it's supposed to be outlawed. Players still do it because it's sometimes just not possible to actually not have your head on touching someone's shoulder, because you're so close, because you changed the way the scrum works. So, they're trying to change something to fix an issue that they created themselves. And quite frankly, I don't think this will do anything in terms of fixing what they're trying to fix, because this problem is something that you created. It's like some of you guys would know if you play rugby. Like it's almost impossible for you to not touching someone's shoulder when you're that close to somebody, having like weight behind you, bearing you forward. Quite stupid. What they need to do is, let's say, revert the scrum back to the way it was. Maybe that'll save some issues. But yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyway. So yeah, we shall see what they do. So I think I reported this last week, but Owen Farrell was injured again, just a bit prior to coming back to Six Nations, and to everybody's joy, he's gonna be out for the full Six Nations tournament. For England as well, Joe Marler is back from his COVID issues, so he's back to this England side. I'm pretty sure this is the second time he got COVID in like 3 months. I'm pretty sure he had it in November. He was set to play, I think he was set to play Australia or the Springboks, and then he was positive. He wasn't able to play like the night before, essentially, and then is positive again. Yeah, yeah, there you go. Twice in 3 months. And then Manu Tuilagi is set to be back for England as well, who was injured against the Springboks. So he will be back for the England side. Eddie Jones is expecting a tough game this weekend against Scotland. So for the first time since 2020, they're going to have fans back in the stadium. And the crowd in Scotland apparently is obviously you would expect when you play the English, not very friendly. Apparently and they are expecting some pretty hostile crowds. Apparently there was a lot of booing last time England were there. There were a lot of hand gesturing, and apparently a beer bottle was thrown at England's side and hit one of the England coaching staff. And then later on, it was said that the bottle wasn't thrown. It was like blown off by the wind from the balconies or something. But yeah, hostile situations will be a cracking game to watch. And this is what it is. This is what the article. Yeah, Eddie Jones was talking at. But yeah, beer bottles, throwing beer bottles definitely too far. But for me, a bit of booing when you're kicking is expected and should be allowed. And and some hand gestures, I think, will be everything you want to do to help your team win, right? If you can distract Owen with your booing, 100% go ahead. So there was some talks about the England number 12 position as a result of Owen Farrell being injured. So at the moment, the speculation is, the team will be announced in like the next couple of days or so. At the moment, it's expected that Mark Atkinson will be set to play for the inside center position, alongside Marcus Smith in 10 and Henry Slade on the outside center. So this speculation is that Eddie Jones has kind of like hinted that he's gonna put defense at the forefront of his selections for that inside center position at number 13. So yeah, gotta be expecting a lot of defending from Eddie Jones. There you go. And then we have in Wales, Ross Moriarty expected to return following his injury against New Zealand in the autumn internationals. Well, that was technically in October. So the October internationals, he was injured there. So Ross Moriarty returning for Wales. And then for Ireland, this was last week we reported there was 3 big names, including including Ty Furlong, Ryan. Anyway, let's have a look here. So yeah, Ty Furlong, James Ryan, and Ian Henderson, they were reported injured last week, but they're all expected to be back in training. So that's really good news for Ireland. They should be back to full strength as a result. So Keith Earls, Josh van der Fleer, and probably most importantly, Joe Carberry, that had an injury since in December. They have all started training fully. And Ty Furlong, James Ryan, and Ian Henderson, who just suffered injuries last week, they are expected to be back in full strength in training as well. So, which is really, really good for Ireland. Really good news to have their full side ready to go. And I think the only person that's still missing is the fullback Lowe, So not quite the same team as the team that beat the New Zealand All Blacks, but should be pretty close. Scotland also has one of their props, lost one of the props actually, unfortunately, due to injury. So James Barty has withdrawn from the Scottish team as of now due to injury. Van der Merwe has linked up with Scotland, so Scotland has lost a player. And France has seen all of their players back into their squad due to COVID isolation issues. So a lot of these players were positive during their club rugby last week, and they were basically it's actually like a week and a half ago now. Their game was cancelled, including Dupont and some of the other key players. These are the players that kind of return. Intermac is back, so you can have a look at the list yourself. But the main thing is, I guess, Anton Dupont, the captain, is back. So all of these players are now healthy again, back and ready to play for France. And then we have some update on Italian's situation for their Six Nation credibility issues. There's been a lot of talks about Italy just being a bye week, and they essentially, the boss kind of came out, Six Nation chief came out and said there's currently no talks of relegation for Italy. I thought there should be like some kind of relegation game. So for example, if you come last in the Six Nations, you have to play, like, say, Japan or whatever, another team to secure your spot. So if you lose to Japan, for instance, you will lose your spot in the Six Nations next year. I think that should be like a good way to go, because at the moment the Italian game is just the bye. It's just a complete shambles. Italy, just give you some perspective, has not won a game since 2015, since they beat Scotland, and they have not. They have never finished higher than 4th. And last year, they got destroyed by everybody. So, yeah, this is pretty poor form. And there has been some talks of Italy trying to get some big names into their team, including Luis Liner, who I think his mother is Italian or something. I think I'm pretty sure his mother is Italian, so he could potentially be selected. But yeah, so I guess Italy needs more than just Luis Liner to be able to hold themselves up for the Six Nations. Anyway, next. So there's a lot of changes in the Super Rugby this year as a result of like different rules between New Zealand, different rules between Western Australia and Eastern Australia. And as a result, the Western Force was based in Perth, is relocating the team for at the moment for the first half of their season. So for the first, as far as I can tell, for the first, I guess, half of their season, they will be relocating to the eastern, the eastern side of to the eastern suburbs, to the eastern states, and they will play their home games that are supposed to happen in the first few rounds in a way, and they will try reschedule the home games later in the season, so potentially couple months down the time, potentially when the restrictions are lifted. So that's the kind of plan for Western Force. So they will play Brumby for example, in the opening match, which is supposed to be a home game for the Force, but this will be played in Canberra instead. And then their away game against Brumbies in round 6 will now be a home game, penciled in home game for the Western Force in round 6. So they basically swapped the home and away for this game. Same with Waratahs. They were supposed to play Waratahs at home at round 4, and now will be played away in round 4 and potentially play at home in round 9. And then they will be hosting the Reds in Queensland potentially. And yeah, that's just the way it is for the Western Force. Another season potentially away from home. And then we have the New Zealanders deciding to relocate all of their teams into a bubble in Queenstown. And the reasoning is if there is a positive case, the whole team has to be isolating for 10 days. That's the rule in New Zealand. And as a result, they wanted to make sure that everybody is safe, put everybody in a bubble. I kind of not agree with this. I feel like you are risking your entire just because how contagious this thing is. If one staff member gets it because they're working catering or something, you have to make contact, somewhere, and then it will be anyway. So it's and the thing is, if one person gets it, the whole franchise is gone. So it's not just like where if you're separate, if one team gets it, the other team can still play, so you can just delay that one game, or just have that or just like one team being affected, one game being affected. Whereas in this setup, the whole tournament's gone for 10 days, right? If one person gets it, the whole tournament is just basically out, because you have everyone in the same bubble. But yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I'm sure they're not gonna have players mingling amongst each other between teams, but still, just in the same bubble, there could be an issue where everybody gets it. But I thought, this is. I mean, it's difficult if they, because obviously New Zealand Rugby don't trust individual teams to do their own bubble from the looks of it. So they wanted to manage the overall bubble, a big bubble, instead of managing 5 or 6 small bubbles amongst the clubs. And also just to get everyone away from their friends and families in a centralized location. I do agree to some extent, but I think it's probably more riskier than before. We'll just see how it goes. The case numbers in New Zealand is pretty low, so it's very unlikely. But I just feel like if something should happen, it could potentially affect everything. So that's the situation in New Zealand at the moment, and they will be moving to Australia in the second half of the season, to starting off in Melbourne, and then play all of their Trans-Tasman games in the second half of the Super Rugby tournament. And then Waratahs, there was some talks last week with Kurtley Beale coming back, and talking about him sacrificing $500,000 salary, but reports came out this week that he's not currently going to be considered for 2022, which is this year. He will potentially be back for next year in 2023, which I do think is the right way to go, because Kurtley needs to make his money, and also he needs to earn his spot back into the Wallabies side and into Super Rugby. So Kurtley is not back this year. He will be back potentially next year for the Rugby World Cup. We shall see. In the Japanese competition now, the superstars, Israel Folau and D-Mac, the two most talked about players in the last few weeks from the Japanese sides. Both of them are not selected on the weekend, so there you go. The two superstars that was heavily talked about suddenly were not selected. There were no injury reasons, just teams shuffling around, and neither of them were selected. Anyway, next up we have the captaincy at the Reds for Super Rugby. So James O'Connor, who was the Reds captain, and some people were talking about potentially him being like the Wallabies captain last year when Hooper was away, but he's currently has kind of stepped down from the captaincy, and the captaincy has been handed to McDermott and Liam Wright instead. So it's just the thing where James wants to kind of focus on his own stuff, and they want to just take the weight off him a little bit to focus on his playmaker role at the number 10 position. So that's the reason that he kind of stepped down essentially as the captaincy. He did a really good job last year. There was, like I mentioned, a lot of talks as a result of his good job for the Reds to take over as the captain for the Wallabies. But that's just what's happened. And then we have a referee position opened up in Australia. So any of you guys wants to be a referee? Rugby Australia is hiring. And Emmy Perrett, the only female referee, I think, for the Super Rugby, ever, and she had one season last year. I thought she was okay, and she retired already after 1 year. Not sure why she said. She's now like a development person working for for Rugby Australia, but she will no longer be refereeing. So there you go. Only 1 year. The one and only female referee gone. And finally, there's a Legends match between, I think, for Tonga. Essentially, the volcano and the tsunami happened in Tonga. So there's a charity match that's been played to raise money to support Tonga. And in the charity match, there's basically some old players lacing up their boots again to play for charity, essentially. So for the, I guess, what do they call it? It's basically the vintage Reds versus, I guess, the vintage Tongans. And then so they have George Smith in the Tongans, Wendell Sailor, Loti Takiri, and obviously something that I'm pretty happy to see, Torai Kefu. He was stabbed in a home invasion in Brisbane last year, so it's good to see that he's back and healthy and he's good enough to play a game of rugby. So the coach of Tonga, he's going to be playing in this game. And then the Aussie side, in the vintage Red side, Crofty, Scott Higginbotham, and James Hobble will be playing for the Reds. So yeah, that's really good. This will be happening in Ballymore in Brisbane, but this will be a charity event. And pretty happy to see Torai Kefu healthy again. And that's news, guys. Six Nations happening this weekend. We'll be doing the team announcement. I guess not team announcement. The lineups, the lineups, the match previews coming up as soon as they're announced in the next few days. So make sure you subscribe. Make sure you follow this channel if you want to hear my stupid opinions about any of this. But yeah, thank you for watching, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what your thoughts of any of the articles. And yes, thank you, guys. Yada, yada, yada. Cheers, and have a good day.